not so what's your point? We live and die, we have no choice.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Bittersweet, Brooklyn. Today we're broadcasting from the north of Williamsburg and south of Greenpoint. Our guest is Jeff Mann, publisher of Greenpoint Gazette. I'm joined by Meredith Chesney and Danny Robo, and Amanda is off on the side taking notes.
We are being interviewing Jeff Mann, so this should be interesting. Welcome. There's a lot of car hate in this new influx of people that we have here. It's interesting, sort of dynamic that, we see groups like Transportation Alternatives, really being, bicycle advocacy and bike lane advocacy. But behind that, I see so much, it's car hate. It's not bike love, but it's a lot of car hate. And so they wield an incredible amount of power, I feel like, in this neighborhood. And we can see that at the community board level. And through support, they get tangentially through other civic groups, I guess they're called, nonprofits and stuff in the neighborhood. And I don't feel like it's working somehow. Hating on cars and supporting bicycles, it's not working as well as it really could.
I feel like this is for some bizarre reason one of those discussions that nobody falls in the middle. And I know it's really interesting because the people that are on the really very pro-biking and you do get, there's no question, it becomes very anti-car. People who are pro-biking have told me, I don't see any reason for anybody to have a car in the city. But I would love the return of trolleys. The buses don't fit on Manhattan Avenue. People can't carry their, especially older people, but they can't carry their, this would solve every problem. And then the trolleys can't veer into the bike lane, so nobody can complain.
I like that idea.
Talk about a nostalgia, for real. But wasn't there a public bus service, trolley service in the north side, in North Brooklyn? There were tracks for so long on the streets, right?
Yeah.
It's a huge network.
Right.
And some of the bus routes still have the same names as some of the trolley lines from way back in the day.
Seeing as it sounds much of a throwback idea, when you think about it, it would actually help the environment. It'd be good on so many different levels.
That's truly rethinking our streets, and I like that. I think that rethinks our streets more than closing them off to cars and, trying to, think about transportation in a different way as it comes to us through this mayoral administration and Jeanette City Collins, them implementing so many of the different summer streets programming that close streets for weekends at a time because we're supposed to somehow meditate on rethinking transportation when I don't get that jump from laying on sod in the street to rethinking transportation, personally.
It's weird because if you go up to Greenpoint Avenue between McGinnis and Manhattan, it's one kind of a narrow lane in each direction and a bike lane painted down the middle. It does make you think, maybe I better look over my shoulder before I make that right or that left. It definitely does remind you to a certain point. How does it, from an infrastructure standpoint, I just realized nobody can see my hand gestures, but from an infrastructure standpoint,
radio pose on.
how much sense does it really make? The car and the bike really can't coexist when there's not enough room for both of them. It just kind of builds in the danger to the cyclist.
Is it okay to have this notion that weekends should be set aside for contemplation and adjustment after work? So uncertain in this day and age, especially with the internet, and I'm going to sound like a Luddite when I say I'm one of those anti-car people. I've never owned a car. I don't even know how to drive a vehicle. I've used public transportation all my life or a bicycle. Automobiles are almost inconsequential to me except for commerce. The only time I think about a future Williamsburg with automobiles, I think of commerce. How are trucks supposed to make deliveries? How is Williamsburg going to maintain itself or maintain the dwindling manufacturing that it has in the area if suddenly we decommission all its streets to automobile traffic? It wouldn't just be a disaster to Williamsburg, it would be a disaster to the city. If you imagine truck routes and even sanitation. If there is ever going to be a world where it's just pedestrians and cyclists, it's not going to happen overnight.
No, you're right. It really can't work that way. And the city has been really hard on business, especially small business. And it is increasingly difficult to get deliveries to and from. I talked to some of the guys who do the small food stuff up here. Manhattan Special is the first one that comes to mind. If you don't know them, they're a 100-something-year-old espresso flavored.
Love them.
So, yeah, the owner's a very good friend of mine for many years. He tells me all the time. I mean, he can't get his product into, into the city. They're constantly being ticketed. I mean, he was getting ticketed in front of his own place because, the way the yellow lines are drawn. It's just becoming increasingly difficult to do business in the city, especially for small businesses.
One of the things that's really problematic in this neighborhood, I feel, is that we have no designated through truck route. We have lots of access to many, many, many streets where many, many trucks, any truck that wants to, regardless of where their manifest says that they are picking up at and going to, they can cut in front of my house, a tiny little street, all sorts of streets. Look at the DOT's map of designated through routes one day and see that right when you get out of North Brooklyn, when you get into Queens, in either direction, they have designated truck through routes. And if you get off that route, it doesn't limit people that need to be here. Local deliveries, they still get delivered. What we don't need is people taking shortcuts through the neighborhood. And we see it all the time. Kent Avenue used to be a two-way shortcut. Now it's just a one-way shortcut for everybody. There's so many trucks that cruise through here that have no business coming through. And I've begged and pleaded for people to get interested in my idea of doing it's a connect the dots from across the Pulaski Bridge, down McGinnis, down to Metropolitan. And unless you need to be on a side street, they don't need to be here. And where is the... It's not even close to done. It's insane. It looks like a bloodshot eyeball when you look at the map, or with blue rather. It looks like it's just a venous system of it's a shit show of traffic. When all the other neighborhoods, Long Island City, your choices are very limited on where those trucks can go. I don't hear them bitching and moaning about it. It's working. And why isn't North Brooklyn part of that same system of having a truck through route? And I don't know who to talk to get them interested in it. It's something I've been talking about for a couple years.
I'm interested in that.
It hasn't gleaned
You gotta talk to Levin and his Gold Coast.
I tagged all these guys in it, and
it's because of this idea of Gold Coast. Remember we were talking about it last episode?
Well,
that's why so much of that happens.
Levin made a comment on one of my posts about it that he would not want to do anything that would limit the ability of local industries to come and go. To which I would say, you do not understand what I am talking about then. Point blank, you don't get it. If you have to be here, you have to be here as a truck. If you're cutting through to get to Red Hook more quickly, no, sorry, get on the highway. You don't need to be cutting through our neighborhood. Why that doesn't garner support from our local electeds is like, come on, either you just don't get it. Because I think anybody that understands it is going to support something like this if you live here.
Unfortunately, I don't know enough about it to really.
I'll be sending you the map. I will show you.
Nothing drives. First of all, for example, they're going to be reconstructing West Street, and I'm not talking about the development. I'm talking about the idiotic reconstruction of West Street that's going to be destroyed a year later when they do develop West Street.
Oh,
it's part of this very large initiative that NAG, in fact, is about.
I don't know what you're talking about.
I have to love the idea, by the way. So just to be clear, I just don't love the timing of the idea.
The Greenway Initiative?
No, the Greenway Initiative is something else. This is not Greenway Initiative. No, this is redoing the streets, putting up more trees, more lighting, getting it ready for right.
That's the critical, but nobody wants to do it.
Nobody's talking about infrastructure. Right. My point is, when West Street gets closed for this job, kind of like the National Avenue reconstruction, unquestionably, I know caused a lot of discomfort. It was definitely a necessary project. I agree with this also. It's definitely a necessary project, although I think the timing is weird. I understand the point that DOT made at one of the community meetings, but we got federal funding. We have to do it.
But what's the consequence?
Use it or lose it.
Explain that, Meredith, please.
Use it or lose it? Yes. Well, another example, I don't mean to sound obsessed with Levin, the Pathways project was a use it or lose it sort of project. That was sort of double duty, the fact that we needed to address Hipster Lake, filling up again because the drains being all shitty. And so the only way to get the drains properly fixed was to bundle it into another project to get the pathways done with, I believe it was city council discretionary funding that got that money. But the only way to get the drains fixed, which is the real problem, was to tie it into a pathways issue that was up there. That's not even the worst part of the pathways in McCarran Park. There's some other areas. So that was, taking advantage of a situation where money's there that would literally disappear within a matter of months if it was not used.
Why was that particular part of the park chosen for?
Because it's closest to, and I think the biggest problem in all of that was the big puddling right there between the ball fields. And
But it definitely needed it. I mean, I'm not saying the other areas don't need it, but I don't think anybody could have looked
Well,
at
the
it.
entire park needs it.
Yeah, 100%.
And underneath it needs it 100%.
All the parks need work across the board. Funding is what funding is. I can't knock anybody for doing this repair because A, it looks great,
yeah,
and B, it needed to be done. I don't think it was discretionary money though. I'm gonna guess it was capital money.
yeah.
It could have been grant. I do not think it was discretionary money. Discretionary went out later on.
Okay.
What was the cost of the project?
What do you mean?
How much was?
What was the cost?
Yes.
$998,000.
Yeah, I don't even know.
I'm close. I know I'm close.
Maybe it's
right
a
around
design
there.
issue. I don't think it's a construction issue or landscaping.
I mean-
Come on. I mean, we're spending $1 million, $2 million, and by the way, we're Williamsburg, or we are whoever we
But
are.
Hipster
Right?
Lake was a health concern. Standing water is a health concern. Mosquitoes and disease, it's a health concern, and we needed those huge puddles to go away. I asphalt.
And the drainage is
Come on,
important.
the black asphalt. It's kind of, cheap looking. It's not park like black asphalt.
I didn't love the end of National Avenue either. Like a lot of people felt it was unfinished, and to me it kind of felt that way also.
$1 million. Drainage issue, maybe, it requires further investigation because the drainage issue is worth, really, it doesn't look like.
First of all, there's no question that the whole contract process needs to be evaluated and changed quickly. And there's just no question about it. You have shoddy work done by people who have contract after contract after contract with the city. This is not the fault of the city council member. This is a much larger problem.
Who got to pick the contractor for that project?
I imagine the Parks Department did. I can't say for sure, but I would have to guess that it went through the city parks. Certainly, it's not going through Steve Levin. And it
Are the contractors local?
I doubt it. Local New York City, not local North Brooklyn. I guess it's hard to get into.
It's baffling at times because for me, it's just, where do you begin, really?
One of the things I would love to see is the next controller. I'm telling you, it's so frustrating because a lot of things people tell me kind of in confidence, I can't repeat. The stuff that goes on in these offices and these agencies, it's, hey, can you break this down by zip code? Are you nuts? You know how much time it's going to take? I'm not going to do that work.
Why? Why would it take that much time?
It's a big job, but it's not. But that's the job these people are getting paid to do. I want to know how much money. Or a better example, Bill de Blasio put out a request maybe a year ago that when there's a crime in a park, it doesn't get reported as a crime in the park. It gets reported as a crime in the zip code. And he said they should separate it out. We should see what's going on in our parks. What's going on? Why not?
While you're on that issue, you care to comment about what's going on in McGolrick Park right now?
Up to a couple of days ago, I really felt it was kids being kids. I saw a story. If it's true, I'm disgusted by it. That somebody held a knife to a dog's throat, or somebody chased a woman out of the park. There can't be violence. There cannot. The other stuff is, it seems to me it really does, like kids being kids that need to be definitely straightened out. They probably need their parents to be brought into the mix and let them know what's going on. But throwing them into the system is absolutely, it's just the wrong way to go.
How do you feel about the discussion of security cameras in the parks?
Well, it depends what they use for. If you're using them to get these kids arrested, throw them into juvie and wait for another generation of kids to come up, then it's not going to work. If you're using them to find out who the kids' parents are, or to get the kids into diversion programs, I'll give props to the Greenpoint Youth Court, who I've been a supporter of for many years, who do great work with these kids. They take low-level offenders who've been arrested, they put them into their program, and these kids, they complete their work. They're given big community service projects, and I think in the Greenpoint Youth Court, they've gotten over 90% completion rate, which is just outstanding.
It's great. Finally, today in the Facebook group of Friends of McGolrick, and a little bit of reason is pumping in today, and it's not vigilantism, but it's people asserting themselves that live in the neighborhood saying, you know, it's time for us to start walking in that park at night again. It's time for us to we can sit out there and play checkers or chess in the park and be there, and we need to meet these kids. We need to know who these kids are, and not with that, so I can grab them by the ear and drag them home to their parents and make sure they get flogged and blah, 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 but about knowing your neighbors, you know, and that human-to-human interaction and intervention as a totally informal sort of.
But on this point, though, it would really be something I told Meredith before we went on. I spend a lot of time in the neighborhood schools. Whenever I go to any of the schools, but because we're talking about a certain age, whenever I go to the middle schools, one of the things we talk about is the changes in the community over the years, and how they feel about them, and what they like best about the community, and what they dislike the most about the community. And the number one complaint at the middle school level, across the board, every year, is there's no place for us to go. They take care of the little ones, and they take care of the grown-ups in the bars, but for us, there's nowhere to go. It's a shame that right away the light bulb went on with, hey, I can make a lot of money. I'll open up a thing for kids, but of course the model doesn't really work, so it's hard, but there has to be a way to get these kids out where they want to be. They don't want to be part of the arts community. They want to be doing their own thing, whether it's shooting pool or whatever it is.
Friendship, right? I mean, they found bond with each other, and that suffices for them, because it's a lot better than the rest of the world.
Yeah, but a place to redirect that energy, it doesn't have to be super positive, saving the world redirection. It could just be betting up, on pool games or whatever it is.
Not for nothing, they're loving this press they're getting.
Oh my God,
They're loving the parks being photographed and the news people being there, photographing their graffiti and all the stuff.
I could not agree more.
It's such not the way to approach the problem by getting them the attention for.
Did you see the big Rolling Stone magazine thing today?
Oh, disgusting.
The bomber.
Okay, disgusting, right?
Yeah.
And the argument against it is what? It's that it's just going to motivate all these fringe people who want to be famous for 5 minutes.
Exactly.
And here
they
you are.
have groupies already.
And here you are, and every time they put a picture in the paper or talk about these kids, you have 10 more kids looking at it going, hey, I'm going up to Greenpoint.
Yeah, that looks like fun.
Not to compare one to the other, of course, but
Well, I mean, there's always the potential, because Tompkins Square Park Tompkins Square Park has always been a park of political activism. There were 2 significant riots then, the last one being in the late 1980s. Sure, that could happen in a second at McGolrick Park if for example, in this day and age, something went viral, whatever that means. But I wanted to return real quick to the security camera issue. If we put security cameras in that park, I'm ambivalent myself. I have no power. I'm just a guest, really, in Greenpoint. I'm not from Greenpoint. I'm from Williamsburg. But if cameras are put in that park, that precedent will stay forever from this point forward. And I think it should be more carefully considered if the choice bears down on whether or not these children are too irksome for us. We're putting up a Panopticon. We should beware. We've shot ourselves in the foot before.
no, I agree with what I said before. It all comes down to what they're going to use the cameras for. I got to tell you, I am not one of those people that's concerned about security cameras on stores catching me on the street. It actually gives me a sense of relief in many ways. I know the whole Big Brother argument, maybe because I'm a parent and a new parent, my opinion has definitely shifted towards I like feeling safe.
Well, I think it's legitimate. There's nothing invalid about feeling safe, but what fascinates me is when you go on Facebook and you read like a thread on friends in McGolrick Park, people who you normally wouldn't think as the kind of persons who would be punitive are vocal and enthusiastic about getting the police in there and sweep the park out. That kind of sentiment quickly transforms a place that is full of cameras.
And they don't work, though, either, in terms of, like, how effective they are. I mean, somebody's argument was like, well, they're everywhere anyway, get used to it. It's like, yeah, and how's that working out for us? We have so much crime still all the time, and if there's cameras everywhere, then
I think it's leading us towards an age.
The cameras don't work. If they're everywhere.
We're in an increasingly voyeuristic society. We're leading towards an age where children are just going to be more brazen. Their attitude about cameras everywhere is going to be so
they
what?
They can't wait to see the video of themselves walking up the park. Can you imagine?
But the flip side of that is there was the shootings last summer, 2 summers ago at the jewelry store on National Avenue, in Manhattan, and they caught the guy only because of security cameras. Although they
That's
actually
a
never
place
caught
of
the same guy.
commerce, though.
Fair
Well,
enough.
that's apples and oranges, though, in terms of placement where it is. A public park is for all the public to enjoy. As a public, we need to come together and take care of our park. And
I just think that the security camera issue is separate from these children. I mean, I
agree with you.
I think people are conflating many different issues and maybe need to pause and parse things out because, especially in terms of the children, the punitive measures are so heavy. They just strike me as being sort of heavy-handed. I mean, there haven't been any measures taken at all, but the calls.
I was one of the first people that threw out a suggestion that is somewhere in the middle of the two, and that would be for actually a neighborhood watch type group, get their hands on a drop cam for $150, place it near the pavilion, and when you see the shit hit the fan, you pick up the phone directly to the precinct to an officer that has been pre-designated that is going to be then working with youth court or some type of entity in the neighborhood to say, okay, we've got somebody that's going to be meeting you at the station in a minute when we pick them up. And then we're going to take them to the parents' house and we're going to get the parent, or the parent's going to have to come and get involved. I'm okay with the idea of just regular, everyday citizens kind of snitching people out a little bit to get them into a place where we can actually help.
The parents
Because
have to be involved.
arresting them after the fact, finding footage of them, oh, they're spray painting, you're going to arrest them, they're going to go through the system like anybody else. There's no support network when they come out on the other side. It's going to do nothing but just delay another set of kids getting into the same stuff. But honestly, I have no faith that the Parks Department or the NYPD are going to do the right things with these cameras anyway. A, they're not going to be monitoring them live, so they're not going to be seeing things as it's happening. That's man hours. They're talking about recording events to wait till something's happening, to review the footage, hopefully to get an ID, to make an arrest. It's a whole lot of money that leaves out the whole human component, which is the answer, is the human component, not the technology.
I ran into this dude who works for the Parks Department. I asked him to be on the show. His name is Larry. He was assisted by this young woman. Her name was Kim, or is Kim. And it was funny because I asked him, hey, would you like to get behind the microphone and talk about what's happening in the park? He said, oh, all those things that are not supposed to be happening? And I thought of the camera issues. I thought, wow, what are parks built for? They're built for this kind of place, not bacchanal, freedom, absolute freedom. And how, the idea of cameras being in the park are right off the bat going to restrict that. Implicitly. I mean, again, I'm ambivalent. I'm just arguing the negative issue because, of course, I want to feel safe going to the park, and I want anyone I know to feel safe going through the park. But I think I'm playing a bit of devil's advocate. So I'm talking about abstractions that I think for many people in Greenpoint, when they think about McGolrick Park, they don't necessarily think about freedom in the absolute sense.
And they're willing to let go of their freedom.
Right.
We're talking about let's close at dusk instead of 1 a.m.
Let's have a
It's
constant
like,
police presence.
so do I get a rebate on my taxes then for those hours of the day that the park is going to be closed? I want a freaking rebate then. That's my park. I paid for it already, and I've paid for the cops to be patrolling that area.
They actually have to raise your taxes because now they need a dedicated employee to lock the park down.
Exactly, and they can't lock it. All it's
And then
going to
we
do
start getting
is going to make it
privatization
very
issues.
easy to do more stop and frisk around McGolrick late at night.
But it's a tough issue. I mean, my wife does not like to take the baby to McGolrick Park because she worries about the homeless guys, the drunks in the park. And obviously we talk about days that it's not packed with kickball players, softball players. You tell her, and intellectually she knows, we've been here long, she knows that these guys mess with each other, they're not going to bother her, they're not going to bother the baby. And as much as she knows that, she just will not go out. So I understand the mentality of the people who are really upset at McGolrick. We may disagree with how they want to handle it, but you can't knock their concerns.
Yeah, I live half a block away from the park. I go through it daily, multiple times daily. I see those children that we're talking about right now. I have the same impression as you. I wonder sometimes if the greater tragedy is yet to unfold, especially with the police there and growing calls for action. And those kids are just kind of When I look at them, they're just kind of like
Oh, that would be-
clueless. They're
that
just
would
kind of
be
cycling around. They don't know all these forces that are arraying against them.
Yeah, and like I said, violence is one thing. None of us is going to stand for it. We all did, every one of us, just stupid things, immature things. I never set a garbage can on fire, but I did other stupid things. Statute of limitations, I'm sure expired on all of them.
Before you shut up, I was telling Jeff about some of the stuff that I got in. I was raised in an incredibly privileged home, in a wonderful, the fanciest neighborhood in my hometown. We were so bored. I was so bored by age 13 that the first natural step was, well, let's set the grass on fire around my elementary school. And we couldn't get the school to catch on fire. So the next week, we were breaking into the school, and I got really good on a regular basis of breaking into the school, which turned into breaking into the teacher's lounge and using a pry bar to open the Coke machine to steal $12 worth of quarters out of it.
It made me want to cry, for real.
The same shit that these kids are doing. It's spray paint and fires and
My childhood was much
the
darker.
story about somebody holding a knife to a dog's throat. I mean, that's scary and weird, and
Right,
we don't even know the whole story though. We don't know what happened.
But if it's true, there's a different animal.
Absolutely not. And I never would. I mean, that is animal abuse stuff. That is a stepping stone to serious crime.
I mean, I want that kid arrested.
Yeah.
If it's one myself like that.
Absolutely.
Well, Kid York, who was on the previous episode, suggested that maybe this was a kid from the outside.
I
Maybe
think
this is
so.
one kid who was coming from another neighborhood.
But these are probably all over kids.
You work for the Greenpoint Gazette. Please.
I own the Greenpoint Gazette. I bought it in June of 2007, and I just take the short story. So I was working on Wall Street. My brother was a real estate developer, a real estate developer, not like some guy who lived here and decided to jump on a train. He did get involved in Brooklyn pretty early. He did the first condo conversion in Greenpoint at 82 Guernsey Street, which is still
We might want to speak to him.
Yeah, he's a good guy. Whether or not he has the time to do an interview, I don't know. He's super busy. But anyway, so he said, I'm doing really well, and property around here is doing well. You should think about making some investment. So okay, so partnered up to buy a building, actually 2 buildings, on Manhattan Avenue, between Nassau and Drake's. There was nothing there, and I'm like, you sure? It's like, I'm telling you, I know. You hang out here, you hear all the time. You should know by now what's going to happen.
I spent a lot of time in Greenpoint in the past. I remember a lot of things being there.
But that block at that point was, it was us, it was Blue Jay Realty. I mean, Enid's and Masters were already there in 07. Irene, later on the block started to get much more.
Like I said, I'm just a guest. I'm a guest in Greenpoint. I'm from the south side, so I hesitate to comment about the history and development in the area. I remember myself recording with the infiltrators on Driggs between Manhattan Avenue and Leonard.
We had the Feather Factory.
We recorded in a basement, right? We had the Feather Factory, but we recorded in the basement on Driggs, and it was awesome. It was one of the most awesome experiences of my life. So I think of Greenpoint very fondly when I think of Greenpoint.
It was great. I mean, we loved it. But when you look at that block now, 6-7 years later, it's just, the change has been so dramatic. It's crazy. We were negotiating to buy the building. The owners of the building own the Greenpoint Gazette. It's a family-run business. It's been covering Greenpoint since 1973. Basically, it was during the height of the real estate market, where sellers really had a lot of control. And the owner, Virginia McGolrick, she told us that, guys, we're telling everyone the same thing. We'll sell you the building, but you got to buy the Gazette, and you got to keep it going for my mother's memory.
Wow.
So my brother and I, we had a conversation, and I was unhappy on Wall Street. It was never my personality. I'm not a Thai person. I said, you know what? Screw it, I'll do it. Run it for a year. After a year, we'll fulfill what we promised. We'll close it up. We'll get on with our lives. And clearly that didn't happen.
And how long has that been now?
Well, it's over 6 years now.
That's fantastic.
So what happened is,
Keep going.
What happened to make this whole thing really just changed my life forever, for better and for worse both. So one day this woman came into the office. It was about a week after we bought the paper. I knew nothing about Greenpoint politics and I knew about hanging out in North 6 and seeing punk bands, but I didn't know anything about Greenpoint politics. I didn't know anything about the schools, nothing. It was all just a blank slate. So this woman came into my office, Latina, crying hysterically, It was Gladys, and I cannot remember her last name. I wish I could. But she came across, said, how can I help you? She said, my mother's going to lose her house. I went to Assemblyman Lopez for help, and he said, there's nothing he can do for me. And I remembered hearing that Joe Lendahl, who I may have shaken hands with once before, who knows, was a really good guy. So I said to her, I said, well, why don't you go to Assemblyman Lendahl? He's great at this kind of thing. Meanwhile, I had no idea if that was true or not. So a week later, she came back to my office, gives me the biggest hug. She goes, so I did what she said, and Lendahl was able to help my mother, and she got another year on her lease, and she kept in touch with me for a couple of years, and after that, after 2-3 years, no more. But I know the mother stayed in the house for that entire 2-3 years, and I just remember thinking to myself, like, wow, this is pretty fucking cool.
That's awesome.
I mean, how often in life do you get to do stuff like that? And then I discovered a whole culture in this community of people who are wealthier, like Elena Norbrodsky or Gina Antonio Argento, and people who aren't, like Laura and Mike Hoffman, who just give and give. If they don't have money, they give expertise. If they don't have expertise, they give time. And it's just, I've never seen anything like it in my life anywhere. And that's my Greenpoint Gazette story.
That's why everybody loves this area, because this particular parcel of land seems to inspire something in people. That's why they've come here all these years. It's not just the past 30 years. If we speak about the history of gentrification, we're talking about the very founding, from the very founding of Williamsburg. There's something about this place that inspires people.
It's true. It's the most bizarre thing is my feet landed here and I'm like, I'm home. And the number of people have told me the same thing is amazing. They had that meeting at the McCarran Rec Center about Greenpoint Landing going up. It was frustrating because we know about the rezoning, we know it's done, it's happening, the 12 buildings are going in. I know Meredith and I talked about how the rezoning can be changed, and the answer is it can be, but practically it can't be.
Who told you that?
You would need.
Was it Stephen Levin?
No,
Because I'll tell you, I was at that meeting and he really annoyed me with all that
Steve Levin at that meeting.
disempowering Stephanie Eisenberg.
I didn't understand. I like Steve, and I hear people say things about him. And
God forgive me also for speaking ill of him.
I'll say this: Steve's a young guy. He makes mistakes like everybody else. His heart has always been in the right place. I've known him since he was a staffer. And the one thing I will say, Steve works his ass off, tries to always do the right thing. If there's any giant criticism of his, on a personality level, is that he wants, he tries to make everybody like him, and that's just impossible.
You gotta be Alexander the Great, and he can be.
Steve,
He can't be everything to everybody.
Steve has tremendous potential, and he's doing great. Listen, Steve.
But there he is at that meeting, and he's disempowering his constituents. Instead of talking about enabling them, he's talking about like, hey, this is gonna happen. Live with it. No, people don't want it. If people don't want it, don't talk about it. They're your constituents. Don't talk about what they can't do.
But here's the thing: if you want to change this, it's the best of my estimation, you would need to have another rezone. I'm not a rezoning expert. I'm not a city planning expert. I know, and I said this to Dennis in an email before we did this. I don't know a lot about any one subject. I know a little about a whole lot of subjects, which goes to being a newspaper person.
That's North Brooklyn, baby. That's everybody.
But if you want to rezone, the speed that you have to get it done before they start breaking ground on these things, I don't see how it's possible. I think
it's possible. Listen, you know what I think is fascinating about New Domino? Let me give you some anecdotal about New Domino, personal stuff. Everyone back then was talking about how it couldn't happen, even though everyone now is saying they saw it all along. You understand? You feel me? Back then, I was having conversations with people saying, hey, but the economic climate is uncertain. It may not happen. No, it's going to happen. There was a kind of fatalist, especially after the City Planning Commission went ahead and voted for it unanimously, right? Mm-hmm. There was definitely this feeling of fatalism. It's going to happen. It's going to happen. Then when it didn't happen, everyone was like, oh, I saw it all along. Give me a break.
Yeah, it's going to happen.
I think these guys, Greenpoint Landing, I don't know, there are ways of slowing things down.
Greenpoint Landing is a different project. Domino is a different project. Greenpoint Landing is a different project. By the way, if anybody doesn't know this, Greenpoint Landing, as I stare at the microphone, is being heard at the community board August 13th and Domino on August 20th. And that's the first step before they go to the city council, the board president of the city council, and eventually the mayor's office.
But when I ran into you on the street the other day, you talked about Banker Street. What's going on with zoning of Banker Street?
Right now, we're looking at,
Who's we?
I'm sure you guys know I'm president of the Greenpoint Chamber of Commerce. And
It's an interesting disclosure.
I don't know if you know the name Bill Harvey.
Creative Economy, Mr. Creative Economy.
I'm saying I interrupted you. Please continue.
Bill approached Joe Lanto. Joe approached me maybe 3 or 4 years ago. And one thing Bill was 100% right about is our business economy in North Brooklyn, number one, the rezoning was, for a million reasons, it's a failure to the community. And there's just no question about it. It's not the community's fault, it's not the elected officials' fault, maybe it's everybody's fault. The fact is there are 3197A plans, nobody can agree on how it should look. The fact is the city came with their own plan and undermined all of them. And the fact is nobody really took a look at all the consequences. I wasn't involved with the rezoning. If I was, I'm sure I would have gone along with everybody else's ideas. They were very big brains, they were very good ideas, and I'm positive that I would have agreed with them at the time. Hindsight's easy to look back and say, this is where we dropped the ball.
No, I'm sorry. That was an outburst.
No, you don't think I would have gone along with it then?
I think that there were people who were foreseeing the disaster.
People foresaw parts of the disaster. But
I mean, I know I was writing about it 20 years. I've been writing about gentrification. I mean, I guess.
But I don't see gentrification as a disaster. You and I could probably part company on this. I think a lot of the result of gentrification for this community has been really good. I think a lot of the things that the community's gotten would not have been gotten without gentrification. Having said that, I also think, and I know a lot of it's been very, very bad. It wasn't thought through.
The rezoning.
The rezoning. I mean, I know this is going to be an unpopular thing to say, but I hate one-way Kent. I mean,
I'm with you on that. I hate
Kent Avenue as a one-way street to me is a disaster. And the number of times I've walked to that stupid two-way bike lane and not look both ways, which I guess is my own fault. But there's so many bars over there, how can I remember everything? But no, but seriously, I mean, they cut off a huge conduit to the BQE, a huge conduit for all of us in and out of the community. On top of it, now they're going to put in a waterfront bus route. So you're going to have a city bus running up White, which has specific school buses, which is their prerogative. Their children do have to go to school. Parking stop. I just don't see it. It's just another plan that I don't see how it works.
But look who supported it, though. When all the debate was going on about one-way Kent Avenue, if you came out against it, you were accused of being a one-note harpy.
Anti-Greenway.
Yes, you're anti-Greenway, and you're anti-bike, of course. It was crazy.
I think it hasn't worked. I think Kent Avenue hasn't worked, and I know a lot of people have privately agreed with me that would never come out publicly and say it, and a lot of people disagree with me. I just don't think it works.
How dangerous has it been? I mean, how many injuries, fatalities?
Kent has definitely improved. It's just one of those things, like I said, that nobody foresaw. And how they did that, I don't know, and when I say nobody, obviously, I'm generalizing. Traffic lights.
Yeah, well, surprisingly, there's been no major accidents or injuries or pedestrian fatalities or whatnot, but what it has done to the traffic on Wyeth is absolutely insane.
Which is a
day. It's absolutely
going
not.
south,
it's
right?
a purely residential street.
Going west.
South.
Go west.
Going
So
southwest.
starting at in front of Brooklyn Bowl there at North 11th in Wyeth, it doesn't matter what time of the day it is. If you're trying to get south, you're going to be in traffic for a while. And none of those people that live on that street had all these trucks rumbling by all day long and cars honking and idling in front of their house. And they're supposed to just accept that because at least there's two-way bike lanes now, and they're going to get a greenway now. And it's like, so that's like another nail in the coffin of industry in North Brooklyn.
By the way, just a side note, somebody, a community leader actually mentioned to me the other day, North 11th and White is now the center of the universe. Oh. And I was laughing, but in a weird way, they're actually right. I mean, you go down to that corner on a weekend between Brooklyn Bowl, Brooklyn Brewery, the White Hotel, and what's the new place called? Outpost?
Outpost, yes.
I mean, it is just packed.
Which leads back to my previous question.
Do you agree?
Oh, we're going to put Amanda on the spot.
But
what does
Amanda is younger.
Think?
So, I mean,
I'm a little too young to be going out to the bars over there, so.
Amanda also grew up in the South Side.
Center,
We spoke briefly about that. I think that's awesome. But how do you feel about? Would you agree? Local, born and raised, that North 11th and White is the center of the universe. Let's weigh that, okay? When people say center of the universe is a big place. There are a lot of things going on in the world. Do you agree that North 11th and White is the center of the universe?
It leads me back to what I asked you before. We were going to talk about Banker Street, and you think about when I first moved to Brooklyn in '95 from Manhattan. I lived on Franklin Street, and everybody knows how horrible the G train is, and so I would take the L, get up at Bedford Avenue, and you would walk, and you would wend your way, and you'd wind up generally around sort of Wythe and North 11, and the natural corridor to go down is Banker Street.
Right.
It's past the center of the universe now to Banker Street. I want to talk about this idea of the rezoning of Banker, because that is potentially a commercial corridor between Williamsburg and Franklin Street, which has also become a major commercial corridor in Greenpoint. And explain to me more about this idea for a rezoning and how that plays into connecting neighborhoods.
So we were approached by several people who have been involved with this discussion for years. Bill Harvey was a legislation introduced by Joe up in Albany about the creative economic zone. Bill's goal is to protect some of the software companies. For example, a company with like them, don't like them is irrelevant. Vice Magazine, when their lease was up, Bill, who I don't even think knows the guy, said, we can't let 150 jobs leave Williamsburg. We got to find these guys a new space. These are the businesses he's trying to protect. Like them or don't like the company, the point is there. Domino Sugar.
Jobs are important. 150 jobs is a significant amount of jobs.
But that 150 people shops in the local stores and eats in the local restaurants. It creates more local jobs. The only thing we're looking at right now in that area is to fund an academic study about what would be the effect. Because we know that the 2005 rezoning had the mostly unexpected effect of wiping out industry up here.
You're talking about it's M1 right now, and some of those lots are M1, M2, and M3 lots.
I don't know what the goal
To
is yet.
change it to mixed use,
I don't know what the goal is yet.
Mm-hmm.
At the best of my knowledge, and I do not know what the goal is yet. We're not at that point. This is so preliminary. But the ultimate goal is to try to bring in and protect and build as much commercial space as we can where we can do it. Because residential real estate is certainly more lucrative than commercial real estate. It's inarguable.
So how do we? What's the nutshell here that we have to crack? Like, how do we reach the soul of these developers so that they do the right thing?
What a great question. We just had a meeting, and the exact question was, how do you convince a developer that it is in his best interest to have a unique business, a cool business, an interesting business as a client, as a tenant? You look at the Dumbo model. Whether you like the Domino model or you don't like the Domino model, it's hard to argue with what the Relentis family did in Dumbo as being a success, unless you grew up in Dumbo.
Yeah, sorry.
That bears comment. I'm telling you, that really does.
And it does. And this will play out here.
I myself was thinking more along the lines of social institutions, which are so lacking now in proportion to the influx of population and resources. I was thinking more along the lines of university, higher education, museums, but not, I've got to clarify, okay, my problem, I want to clarify my problem with the Save Domino people, because I've seen everyone signing the petition. I've been compelled also. The reason why I hesitate is because this is not a consortium that's been forthcoming about affordable housing. And I'm interested in hearing their plan first when they release it on August 1st before I throw my weight behind them. If they even care, or if it's even significant. But I'm just saying, before I were to jump in and say, okay, we got to save Domino from this, I've got to consider the fact that the museum that was proposed in the past as an alternative proposal to CPC's vision of New Domino.
You talking about Stephanie Eisenberg's proposal?
I guess it's Stephanie Eisenberg's, but she had some support, right?
Listen, Stephanie Eisenberg definitely understands the rezoning better than
Oh, she's a genius. No, listen, there's no... in no way am I trying to reduce her intelligence or influence over the state of affairs, but I only counter her choice in the matter. That's it. I only counter her position, which is to build a museum. My attitude about the whole thing really is the entire parcel should be given over to the poor so that they can build a university of civic engineering with their own hands. And in building the civic engineering with their own hands, be a model for the entire world and be a true center of the universe. Not no North 11th and white, ridiculous white hotel nonsense.
This is one of those moments where you take somebody you respect and you value their opinion and you disagree anyway. You know, and for me,
fair enough.
For me, the biggest example of that is the Newtown Creek Nature Walk. And Christine Holland, if you hear this, please forgive me. I have a lot of trouble understanding spending big money on projects that are not going to be used by the community at large. I mean, you know, $2 million to put purple lights on the Newtown Creek wastewater treatment plant, which at the you know, I mean, I just don't understand that. You know, I mean, parks money for parks, yes. You know, I'm not saying that earmark that money for affordable housing, which, you know, you can make that argument, but it's not like McGolrick and McGolrick didn't need improvements. It's not like Bushwick and Brooklyn Park doesn't need to be built. It's not like Transmitter Park didn't need to be built, which they did a great job on, you know, as small as it is. And the food concession and everything else, yes, we know, it's an absolute disaster. Everything's going longer than it should. That's what we go back to the beginning. You know, this whole conversation can boil down to like 2 or 3 talking points, and one of them is that the city needs to evaluate how they do contracts, how they spend money. I mean, I don't know, but I think I know that it would cost the city 3 times what it would cost a private developer to build a school at Greenpoint Landing.
Why?
Between the amount of oversight that the city requires versus what a regular developer would use, it's outrageous. It's just,
so it's a personnel issue. It's not necessarily.
The system's broken. You know, I'm not going to get into a discussion. I mean, I'll get into any discussion with you.
But press the time.
But from a time standpoint, and also because it's just not what we're talking about. You know, when the whole thing about putting more oversight on the NYPD, I ended up agreeing with the people who opposed it for a number of reasons, but the biggest one is, why would you create another level of bureaucracy?
Layer of bureaucracy.
You know,
that's all.
And by the way, the letter grades in the restaurants, the same thing. Part of the bill.
Sometimes the police shoot people. That's why.
That's right, but that's.
I'm okay with adding an extra level of bureaucracy if it counters that. I'm okay with
It's not going to counter that.
But it doesn't. It's just a way to hide and spend money. That's what privatizing parks and the partnerships do. That's another layer of bureaucracy.
You know, I was about to say, anytime you have somebody who's advocating for one side and getting paid by the other side, it can't work. And I'm talking about the oversight of the police department and nobody else.
It's a money factory. And thank you, I get that. We know you love OSA and
I love everybody.
you love everybody.
The truth is...
Well, let's go back to the Greenpoint Gazette, okay? Because that might tie into your love of OSA.
I don't love or not love OSA. I mean, OSA... The idea makes sense, a ton of sense.
How does it make sense? How do partnerships make sense to you?
I mean, you know, the way the city operates, to have an outside interested party on the ground, I favor the Board of Education versus mayoral control. That was not always the case. When Bloomberg was first taking control, I was very, very happy. I know how the Board of Ed operates. I know how much money is wasted. I know how much bureaucracy is there. I knew it had to be broken up. Eventually, it wouldn't just bankrupt the city or something. It had to be changed. So I'm very excited. And then I saw mayoral control in action, and I realized that while it had to be changed, this was not the answer. So back to parks. You know, and so the biggest problem, or one of the biggest problems right now with mayoral control, is they don't understand on the community level what the kids need and what the schools need. They don't relate to whether we need bilingual stuff in the South Side or we need more arts education in Bushwick or the North Side where more art galleries have been opening up. They cannot relate on the local level. And in the parks, it's not any different. And to have an organization like the Prospect Park Alliance, the Central Park Conservancy, or the Open Space Alliance partnering up with the city and representing the community is great. Where we have a problem is the way OSA's executive directors, and I know Ed Janoff is a really bright guy, and you know, I have high hopes that he's going to be successful. But the way they fund that job, where it's half by OSA and half by the city parks, how loudly can you scream at at the person signing your paycheck? So I think the job is a built-in weak spot.
That's a lot to digest, just in general, because my feeling still goes back to partnerships just make it easier for parks to shirk doing their responsibilities and things that they have done for 100 years or more in New York City of running parks, running some of the most beautiful parks in the world, and there's no means by which the general public is to really see the fruits of their labor yet. Anyway, I mean, we hear I posted on Tommy Torres was campaigning on friends and families of McGolrick Park the other day, and I asked him outright. He's talking about I love parks. I spend a lot of time in parks, and that's great. And he said that he wants to make sure there's plenty of funding for parks. So I asked him outright, how do you intend to do this? Through restoring taxpayer-based financing for parks or through partnerships? And I got the middle of the road answer of like, well, I support partnerships and da 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 da. But I really further that and say cite an example of a partnership that is performing to the level of the expectations that we all should have. And I still really believe that we're not seeing the return. We've had OSA in control of North Brooklyn Parks for years. Where are they spending their money? They're making money. We know how they make it. They make it with concerts and selling Brooklyn Brewery beer. But where are they when it comes to hiring a security guard to be working in McGolrick at night? They're saving up all their money to put some ice rink in the McCarran pool when there's stuff right now, today, that needs financing. And now we can't go to parks, we can't even go to Community Board 1 and say there's problems going on in parks, because they're gonna go call OSA, deal with OSA. And I can call Kevin Jeffrey, the Brooklyn Borough Commissioner, to say hey, this is going on, and he's gonna say call OSA. Well, that does nothing, though.
I mean, so obviously, I really hope that Ed is going to be able to lobby parks. He's going to be able to do exactly what I'm saying. It's really important for the partners. And partnerships have worked. We've seen Prospect Park go from a dump to a really spectacular park in just a few years.
It's a venue for Googa Mooga to rip up the grass and sell a shitload of beer in the park and ruin it for the people that use it on a day-to-day basis. It's wonderful for the tourists and the people that want to come to their little outdoor food court mall for a weekend, and the Alliance can make a shitload of money, and the promoters make a shitload of money. What does that do to the people that use the park on a day-to-day basis? Parks are not for the tourists. Parks are not for mini malls. They're for me that has to walk my dog in a park every day. Where's the return for me, the taxpayer that's already paid for it once, who's expected to then volunteer and pay for it twice, and maybe then I'll also make a contribution and pay for it 3 times? I'm sorry, I didn't go to Stern, but I don't need that kind of background to figure out this is a bum fucking deal.
I agree, Meredith. My proposal is let's topple some of these condominium complexes that are adjoining the park and make them into park space. I'm down with it.
Yeah, I'm sure that'll
But
happen.
since people who read the Greenpoint Gazette are obviously going to be listening to this, they should hear us say that.
Yeah,
We're down with toppling some of these ugly buildings that are across the street and restoring them.
Since Meredith and I talked about this, where is the community outcry? I can see reneging on the city storage land.
I mean, I wouldn't call it an outcry, but there definitely has been some response.
Yeah.
Very,
We're
very,
all waiting with
Muted.
bated breath.
At the beginning, it was loud, and it was where's my park day, and it kind of just.
Oh, now we're in the zone of let's court them. And I don't know him. I don't know Norman Lane. I hear lovely stories about them. I'm sure they're wonderful people.
Yeah, good people.
And now, all I hear, though, from my friends that know them and get to hang out, it's let's get into this inner circle and be around that and hope that everything pans out really well. It's hoping and wishing, they're bullshit. This is war at this point. As far as I'm concerned, with Domino, I'd be thrilled. I even said to some of my friends on the internet, I'll put 10 grand toward the first person that can authenticate some Native American burial ground remains on the Domino site. Just shut the motherfucker down, because we don't need those buildings. It's a low, we're just being sold a bill of goods. You know, when are people gonna be like, wake up and go, that we don't have to stop this. It's not about stopping anything. We can't stop anything. Just take a breath and slow down and look at this development on steroids and be like, okay, maybe we've got time. Maybe I want to leave myself. Maybe you, as a person that owns your own building, you might want to leave something for your child to develop themselves. Because at the rate we're going, there ain't going to be shit left. It's all going to be perfectly manicured. It's going to be perfectly done within 15 years, and it's over. And at the rate we're going, you know, it's so inorganic. There's nothing wrong with development. Development happens, but there's nothing organic about how this development has happened. And people need to wake the hell up and go, it's okay to say slow down.
You know, to your point, I suspect that 15, 20 years down the line, there's going to be a waterfront community, possibly even a gated waterfront community, and there's going to be a separate inland community.
Oh, you think we'll even still be here?
Yeah, we'll be here, and it's going to be a completely separate community. I mean, when you think about it, how often do you really walk by where Greenpoint Land is in New York?
I go up there with my dog. I walk my dog to the new $2 million bathroom.
By the way, just for the record, I hate the 12 buildings. I use the city building on Long Island City as an example to people all the time about how things wrong. Understand that, yes, I know this drives you crazy. I am of the mind that it's done. I mean, and it's to a certain extent it is done.
It does drive me crazy.
Because Northside Piers isn't coming down. The edge is not coming down. At least not by legal means.
No, but
I'm not advocating anything else.
No, but we have time,
Well,
I think, for the rest of the waterfront.
There's time to negotiate, I hope, West Street. I mean, West Street really makes me sad.
The battle is not yet over.
It's
Not
not-
until the spade
not
hits the
over.
ground, and even then, there's something to be done.
I suspect that the battle is over for Greenpoint Landing. I think there's room. I pray there's room. And West Street to me does it need to be fixed up a little bit? Yes. Does it need to be high rises? Absolutely not. Those buildings make me so happy. Every time I walk into 67 West or walk into
What would you like to
Shores,
see there? What would you like to see there?
oh my God! I like what they have now. Fix them up, clean them up, sturdy them up, whatever you need to do. I mean, I love the commercial businesses over there. I mean, it's Green Desk at 67 West. You go up to the 5th floor there. It's unbelievable. My friends from the stores tell me when they were cleaning up, when they first moved into the building, they found 100-some-odd-year-old box of shirts that was left behind. You know, there's no rope factory. They found shirts, they found old rope, they found building material. Who wouldn't be hurt by the idea of just imploding these things and building high rises?
But short of another rezoning, how can we stop this?
I don't think you can. I'm not an expert, but I don't think you can.
I like Ms. Hoffman's attitude about we gotta lay down firm machinery sometimes.
I like her
Sometimes
attitude
you gotta do
also.
that. You know, sometimes you gotta.
God bless her. And the thing, you know,
I'm with Laura and Mike, if you can hear me and you listen to this, and I know you are, I am very proud to have you guys as friends. You do great work.
If she gets down, I'm down too.
Yeah, Laura and Mike are.
You tell her that.
It's
I'm sure
all
she's
for
gonna
the
hear
earth.
it anyway. So.
There's salt to the earth.
You know, I mean, I like a lot of the new things that are coming. I think it's baby with the bathwater.
I think that people also, when it comes to the issue of gentrification, I think some people are mistaken about my real feelings about the future of the neighborhood. I'm not opposed to change, that's preposterous.
What do you think the future is going to be?
I think the future of the neighborhood is going to be a green valley. I think that there won't be automobiles, in fact. I think that there won't be cyclists either. I think, in fact, streets will be decommissioned and there'll be farmland in between the streets and on the rooftops. And
When?
20 years. And I say the BQE will be decommissioned in a manner that's similar to the High Line in Manhattan. I see manufacturing staying in Williamsburg, and I see a correction of many of the mistakes that have been made over the past 30 years. I see it. I'm positive, I'm not a negative person. People think I am, maybe because of my writing, but I am not a negative person at all. That's how I see the future of the neighborhood.
He's got a bolder vision than I. I have a pretty cryptic vision. I feel like it's going to turn exactly into everything I left. Yeah, I left Knoxville, Tennessee 30 years ago and moved to Atlanta, which is it's a big city. It's 3 million people, I guess, when I lived there. And I moved to what I thought was a pretty neat little neighborhood. I liked where it was, which we called Virginia Highlands. They're in Little Five Points area, which in the 80s became, that's where the hipsters went and started making it nice, and nobody in this room can afford it now. I'm certain of that. And I came up here, lived in Manhattan, lived in the West Village and the Lower East Side for a long time. Left the Lower East Side when I felt like it was turning into NYU, corporate hell. There's restaurants with Shea in the name on Avenue C, and came out here. And when I look at the renderings for shit like Domino and Greenpoint Landing, it's all we're gonna have. And it's gonna cater to the most decadently boring, bourgeois, suburban, mall culture, bunch of jerks that, they're fine. These are people that are members of my own family. I've got, I know these people, but there's a reason, like, people come to New York to have something bold and fresh and original. You don't come to New York to find something that you can find at the freaking Short Hills Mall. Sorry, no offense, New Jersey, but Brooklyn is supposed to be Brooklyn. And this ain't Brooklyn, and this sucks, and I'll still be here, and I'll be here yelling, God, if I make it to 80, I'll be standing on my fucking street corner,
I hope you do.
going, defend
really
Brooklyn, yuppie scum, go home. It's tired and boring. It's you can find it anywhere in America. How did Brooklyn turn into any town USA? And that's why I'm getting upset right now just thinking about it. But I understand the ferocious passion by which people like Die Hipster and people on the internet yell back at these asshole gentrifiers that think this is fucking great. It's not great. Move to Cleveland if you want it. We don't need that here. There's no reason to have it here for the convenience of people with wealth, to feel at home, to surround themselves with people that are just like themselves. Bullshit. You can afford to go anywhere. We can't, and we were here first, so fuck off. That's how I feel. As tears stream down my face.
I have a similar attitude.
One of the things that Meredith and I have talked about a bunch of times, and something that I pray I'm able to do something about, because, I am very lucky that over the years I've built a coalition of intelligent friends. I was saying before, you have a community of activists, and I'm really lucky to have friends like Gina and Tony Argento, who I know people say what you will. Broadway stages arguably supplies 25% of the money that changes hands in North Brooklyn. And I'm not talking about...
That's a significant amount.
Yeah, but I'm not talking about Tony and Gina spending 25%. I'm talking about all the film companies...
The entire commerce universe.
They found a two-block area that was demapped, right by on Kingsland, right by the creek, by the wastewater treatment plant. They got Joe Lento, our assemblyman, who does I can't even say how much the guy does and how much the guy wants to do, and it's I said it to somebody the other day. The guy, for an elected official in his job, as long as he's been in that job, to still show up everywhere all the time and still try to come up with new ideas and ways to fix some of the mistakes that he's owning. I can't say enough good things. And we meet often and we talk about the fact that Meredith's employees and other employees can't afford to live where they work anymore. It's just such a huge problem.
It's so the antithesis of Williamsburg and North Brooklyn, right? Because Williamsburg was the place that people went who were poor. People came to Williamsburg because they knew their child would not be rejected at PS19 or the other area schools. They came to Williamsburg because they were poor. They want a reversal, right? That now it's so hostile to the people who made it what it is. Because the people are here. The struggle is enduring.
It makes me sad. I gotta say though, it makes me sad to see Lintal show up at the Two Trees people. They opened this temporary intermediary, totally awesome, BMX course with a bunch of stuff going on. And I just see it as like, this is such a placebo. It's a little sugar pill that we're being handed this medicine. We're doled out the development in doses, and some people respond to it and some people don't. And I really get this everybody drank the fucking Kool-Aid with this thing. So they see this little park we're gonna have for a year, and it's all well and good. It's like, but it's gonna go away. And I just feel like it's such a weird little ass kiss kind of a thing to get to distract us from, you know, the inevitable. And I resent the hospitality that we're showing to Two Trees because I hate their design. I hate their plan. Honestly, I'd probably hate any plan if it involved more than 300 units of housing and
It's gotta
a
be
school.
all
Me
affordable.
personally, I would love to see a VOTEC school. Now, I'm hated for that. I'm a knuckle dragger, working class, you know, schlub, because I believe that vocational and technical education are really important and can really, really do great things for a lot of communities. And we've seen, you know, VOTEC be decimated in this country and totally maligned for this myth that everybody needs a college education. And this is somewhere that Dennis and I are gonna disagree totally.
And you're not exactly the same page yet.
Yeah.
Well-
when my son was born, I said to my wife, he needs to learn how to become an electrical engineer. He's not going to trades. Going, okay, let him go to Harvard, get his master's in electrical
First.
engineering, and then go back and learn to be an electrical engineer and get a job.
You know, and what's
Let
the
me explain
shame
money.
though in that?
Do you know how hard I work for no money? Do you think I want my son to have to live? You know, I want to have the good things that I've earned in my life. But I don't want him to. I want him to work hard and make money.
But what's this whole thing though? You know, I read this in the comments in the Brooklyn paper of people, you know, talking about how, you know, working class people and in trade school type people that go to VOTEC were somehow lesser than. And it is really amazing to me, like how much actually we contribute. I contribute, I feel like, to this neighborhood, and I know that my husband, who is a construction guy, contributes a lot. It's like, do we really want to live in a society where it's all just MBAs and MFAs and, you know?
But what do you do if you can't create the killer app? There has to be another job for you. You know, one thing I learned from my brother is with the real estate is every time he would do a project, he'd be interviewing electricians and he'd be interviewing plumbers. I'm like, dude, you've been doing this for 1,000 years. You know, why don't you have a regular guy? He's like, they're just so hard to find good guys, and it's a high-paying job, it's a respectable job, and I'm with Meredith. I don't understand why it became I mean, I understand why it became a dirty word in this country. I just don't. I think it's time that we turn around and look at
There's so many.
Thank you for listening, ladies and gentlemen. That's all we have. Follow us on Facebook at www.facebook.com/Bittersweet Brooklyn. I'm Dennis with Meredith signing off from Brooklyn. Peace.